Past, make a start. To tell those of us recognised strangers, KPMG come with mugshots on page 22, so I can tell immediately that Jonathan Gorey is on the left and Adrian Benson is on the right, which is fantastic. Well, photographs, right? First time seeing those. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you. May I sign the minutes of the last meeting? Yeah. Do you have any apologies? Councillor Olga. Yeah, he's given me his. No declarations. Right, we have two reports from KPMG. Firstly, the audit plan for the year just finishing, and then your audit progress report. So who's addressing these?
Right, I'm going to kick off on the plan, and then Adrian may chip in, but will also then be this report.
Yes.
Which kind of does make a logical process, because the progress report will actually talk about how far we've got with the plan. So I'm going to flip through the pages, if that's okay, but focusing mainly on where there's sort of things that are different from the normal plan. So starting on page 2, that's really just saying that there's two main elements to the work. There's the financial statement audit, and there's the value for money arrangement work. So it's those two main elements that we focus on, and that we then go into more detail on. So moving into the financial statements audit planning on page 3.
We've got 12 at the top, 3 on the
right, 3 on our little version.
On the bottom, yeah.
You're right, page 12, the full set. There's a big circle with sort of blobs in it, and those sort of represent the idea of a sort of population of risks to the, if you like, the accuracy of the audit statements. And what we're highlighting there are ones that we have to focus on a bit more. In fact, both of these ones that are highlighted in dark colour, management override and revenue recognition, are things that we have to consider under audit standards, so they're not something specific to the accounts or the audit of Daventry. On page 4, we then look at those in a bit more depth, and we actually are able to what we call rebut the fraudulent revenue recognition one, which says, based on the work, our assessment, that we don't need then to look at that in more depth. The management override and controls is something that we always have to do, and always have the sort of procedures that we apply are built into the audit. So that's things like the work we do on journals and how we go about testing those, because those are the bits where management can potentially manipulate the accounts. Then turning over to page 5, we have another area of audit focus. So this isn't a significant risk, but it's just something that we want to spend a little bit more time on, based on the work we did last year and some of the findings there. I mean, investment properties are a big issue, quite a big element for you in terms of their share of the balance sheet. So that's just an area we're going to focus on a little bit more. Moving on to page 15 out of 58, we talk about materiality. Again, this is something that we're required to bring to the attention of those charged with governance. We try and explain what it means and how we use it. It's not actually that straightforward, because the actual overall level of materiality is not the only number that we look at, and sort of we try and explain how we then use that in more detail, and include where we actually will report numbers of a much smaller number magnitude to the audit committee. The overall level of materiality has actually come down just a little, which is something we're doing again nationally, but reflecting on kind of the tightening environment of finances in local government. So that's then the end of the financial statement section, and moving on to value for money.
Wasn't there any questions on that? section.
That's it's probably a good point to pause.
Only one from me, which it winds me up when we have headlines that are then discounted, because people often read simply a headline thinking that that's an accurate summary of the rest of the document. So we read in the headline that revenue recognition is a significant risk. Significant risk, blah, 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 blah. And then you say you're discounting it later, you're setting it up as a significant risk, and then saying, okay, it's not a significant risk as far as local government is concerned.
It's a potentially significant risk, perhaps would be more accurate.
Or even for local government?
For any set of accounts, and indeed for some public sector accounts, yes. And also, we are required under auditing standards to consider it explicitly. So, we couldn't say nothing about it. If then someone came along and looked at our plan subsequently and said there was no mention of it, they would say that's offending. So I understand that it can set hairs running, but we are trying not to.
Okay, any other points on that first section?
On bank for money arrangements.
Page 17, Chris, of the KP of the papers.
That's right.
Nick, sorry.
We have talked, I think, to you a little bit about the slightly amended process for value for money. It's a sort of slightly tightened up approach now that the National Audit Office are in charge of the guidance rather than the Audit Commission. Perhaps the easiest way of looking at it is in terms of page 7 or page 16. There are the 3 circles which give you the areas that we focus on in our value for money work. Informed decision making, so that's about what is the management information and what in particular is the financial management information on which you base your decisions and the governance around those. Sustainable resource deployment, that's looking at how you're planning to use your resources, so both your people, your assets and your money. Those 3 dimensions are explicitly covered in the guidance, and then working with partners as increasingly is important for a lot of public sector organisations. I'll actually pass over the next 2 pages, which are kind of an outline of the value for money process, if you like. Happy to take questions, and then focus on page 19 of 58, which is the risk that we pulled out. So this is the area that we have followed our initial risk assessment process. We've pulled this out as the thing that we want to focus on the value for money work. And I suppose it's a combination of, despite your very sound financial position, the overall contextual tightening and challenges that local government sector faces, together with the specific challenge of the potential impact of the county's quite difficult financial position, and the potential for what knock-on effect that might have. So it's sort of rolled into one issue around how you will look at your medium-term financial plan, what are the assumptions on it, how you manage your risks to your financial plan. That will be the focus of our work on value for money.
So you try to identify risk expressly associated with the financial position of the county, on us.
Well, we're saying that the very difficult financial position that the county was not just a financial, I suppose it is a financial, but it is an operational position, it has knock-on effects. That it can have effects on other bodies in the county. There's no direct risk at the moment, but it's actually is quite a bad position, and you just never quite know what might happen. If things get worse. Waste is an area we've talked about both here and elsewhere, that there is a direct knock-on effect, and there's been discussions about whether there are some aspects of the county's plans that could knock on into what have an actual direct financial effect on the districts. As yet, that hasn't crystallised. But I think the the position is severe enough that, you know, quite what's going to happen next is actually not clear. You know, we are worried as auditors of the whole patch.
You do the
Not
audit,
personally,
you do
but
the
we
audit
do.
for the county council.
We do, yes.
I don't envy those.
No, well, I'm glad it's not me.
If I may, Chair, just comment, obviously, just to let members know, obviously that is something that we recognise, and it is on our strategic risk register, specifically with mitigating actions, where we're aware of, you know, the sort of direct links between us and the County Council. If things were to go, you know, even worse, we'd have to look at that. There are some unknowns in what would happen there, but it is recognised on our own strategic risk register.
Can I ask a question? Yeah, thank you. The data you have, 8.7 million overspend, is that the most up-to-date, accurate data that we're currently working on? Or is that just an estimate, best estimate guess at the moment?
Well, it's
Sorry,
probably a few weeks out of date at least.
Right.
So I wouldn't necessarily. It will have come from somewhere written,
Yeah.
but it's probably quite a few weeks out of date now.
Would there be a point as we move on to the next financial year that you would get better up-to-date details about whether that's accurate or going to be behind where it currently stands?
Well, I suppose there will be figures in the public domain. We will certainly be, looking at those, and we could certainly, we would expect to, when we report on the value for money, we would be coming back with some of those. But ultimately, we would probably only report on things that were in the public domain in some respect.
Okay.
So the significant factor is not so much whether it's 8 or 18. The fact is that there is cash shortages which could impact on operational issues, which could impact upon us.
And it is affecting, I don't think, I'm sure it is affecting how they're relating to the district. So the time they're giving, for the nature of the time and the sorts of consultation they're doing, it's not as it probably should be, because of the extreme situation they're in. I think that's again that's not sort of a surprise. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just then, concluding on the final page, 20 of 58 of the main document, this just sets out some of the other things that we do or that we have to take into account. There's a process called the whole government accounts, which is an attempt to put the sort of national accounts together, and we feed into that. We report on what we might have to do if there's an elected challenge. We talk about our team, our reporting, independence, objectivity. This is something again that we set out in more detail in the appendix, but it's actually something that we have to consider explicitly both at the planning and the reporting stage. How have we considered our own independence, and and we have to report that to you as part of the process. The audit fee is also set out there, and in fact we've just recently written to the council about the fees going forward, which are being maintained at about the same level. I don't want to go into the appendices in any depth, but obviously happy to take any further questions on them.
Thank you. Any questions?
There was just one comment, well, some of the questions really, with regards to the paragraph on the audit fee. I just found that was a little bit confusing really, particularly the second paragraph. That's just me, I don't know.
Can you say a bit more? The first paragraph.
Well, the second paragraph, it says that the planned audit fee for 2015-16 is 48,000, compared with the reduction. The annual figure for 14-15 was presumably 4 times.
Yes, you're right. That's the percentage decrease, not the absolute amount.
Yeah,
The 16,000 is the reduction.
Yes.
I kind of got that, but I just thought it was.
I agree. It is slightly strangely worded.
Thanks. Any other questions, points? Good, I think that's fairly clear. Thank you very much.
Shall we move on to
Move
the
on to
progress
April.
report?
I'll do that then.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just pick up page 28 of your documents pack. I'm giving a progress report on the audit to date. John's mentioned the plan. What we're saying here is that we've actually completed not just the planning stage, we've also carried out our interim visit, and that's where we're looking at controls that you have in place in your financial systems. Based on the work we've done to date, there's nothing we've had to bring to the attention of management, and there's nothing that we need to report to members. So no findings that we need to bring to your attention. So in that sense, no news is good news. I would also just pick out page 33 in 58. That's about the new local audit framework. You've heard from us at previous committees about the process for appointing auditors going forwards, and so the update to that is that there is now a proposal of national approach to this. Which I don't really want to say anything more about that in terms of your response.
Yeah, I mean, happy to really. The fact that sort of the proposals going forward, the various sort of options as to how we would next appoint auditors, and each council having to go through the same process of maybe setting up an audit panel in order to, that's quite intensive and a lot of work for authorities to do. And what's being put forward is a proposal that actually I always get my S's mixed up, the PSSA or PSAA, that way around, the public sector audit. They're proposing that they carry on to do it sort of nationally, and certainly, you know, with the progress that we've seen in what they've achieved so far, and the savings that we've seen. But on top of that, we've definitely enjoyed a better relationship where you have sort of one set of auditors for all the authorities, if you like, within your county. Now that's not always the case, and there was a time when I think one of the authorities within the county had been given capita, possibly, whereas the rest of us were KPMG, and we learn a lot from having the same auditors, the same issues. We share the processes going through, we share good practice, and it will save us, you know, a lot of work in actually appointing those. So the LGA are leading on this and are asking authorities to sort of speak up if they're in support of it. I've had emails from all of the other finance officers within the county to say that they would be supporting that going forward, and strongly suggest Daventry will be in the same position.
Yeah, the PSAA, they will be drawing up a short list of approved local government auditors. Now, there would still be more than one firm on that shortlist.
Oh yeah. It'll be spread about like it is now, really.
Yeah.
But they'll organise it
but
for us.
Would there be some sort of agreement between the county authorities to choose one?
As to the actual final details of how they'll do that, whether it's along the same lines as it is now, where we're told who we've got, the final details I don't know yet, because it's a new proposal.
Well, the PSA aren't going to be telling anybody, are they? They're going to be maintaining a list.
Well, yes, but they
of auditors.
appointed the auditors to each authority, so we were told we'd got KPMG. So, as to how that moves forward.
So, if the county authorities commented to PSAA that they would actually value the same auditor, PSAA would appoint one for them.
Well, we'd like to think they'd take it into account. They certainly did when, like I say, one of the authorities was going to be awarded another auditor. They made a representation to them.
With effect 17-18?
No, it's been put off a year. Yeah. So it's
18-19?
Yeah.
So you're doing two more?
Yeah.
Would that be based around competitiveness as well?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Good. Anything else on that? Yeah, I mean, before we carry on, we've got fairly novel section of the report where KPMG are prompting us to ask questions. Is this how you order? Is this how you expect the matters to proceed? Are we having are you intending to respond as invited by the right-hand column?
Chair, for me, the right-hand column is as much for you as members to consider how you want to respond to this. The technical update section of this document is for more information.
Yes.
Not just for this committee, but for the wider members of the council, and indeed for officers of the council. So we would encourage this to be shared as widely as you want it to be. But from a sort of KPMG perspective, it's a prompt for you. You may wish to consider asking us further questions, asking your officers.
But it doesn't require anything.
Okay, yeah.
Chair, just to add that sometimes we would need to prepare a proper written submission to the committee to consider what to do next, so that would be appropriate to digest therefore what's been said by KPMG and the committee's response to that.
Well, I think we're clear upon the council's response to PSAA. Yeah. Good. Thank you.
Chair, I just wanted to mention one other page, page 35, was about the exercise of public rights. Members may be familiar that every year the public have a right to examine not only the accounts but also other documents supporting the accounts. They also have a right to come and ask questions of the auditors. They have a right to raise objections about items of expenditure in the accounts. In the past, the period for which those rights can be exercised has been the start date has been agreed by ourselves and officers, and that's been published in the local press. The regulations have changed this year such that the period for exercise of public rights is now a 30-day period, and its start is slightly flexible, but it must include the first 10 working days in July. So that's just of note for members, because it's your electors who may and have the right to ask questions. So just to make you aware, it's the inspection period must include the first 10 working days in July.
So what timetable are we working towards? Because there is a timetable on which the accounts got to be approved by this committee. And that's after this date?
Yes.
It is. I mean, the statutory deadline for me to sign the accounts off as a produced statement is still the 30th of June currently, albeit that's going to change going forward. And the date for the audited accounts is still the 30th of September.
Yeah.
So no change there. This is just really there was always an inspection period before, but this is just, if you like, giving it a different period within still that window between the end of June and the end of September.
This committee's key date is to approve by 30th of September.
That's right, and that hasn't changed.
So that's dealt with in our 22nd September meeting.
It is, yeah.
Got it.
However, that's the timetable that there is a process to bring forward over the next 2 years.
Yeah.
So, that's something we're working with authorities on, about how do we plan to work together to produce and audit accounts to a tighter timescale, and that will mean that your session will be brought forward over the next couple of years.
Chair, could I just ask, in that little spiel you said that members of the public can challenge individual payments and financial transactions, I assume by that. What did you mean by that?
Members of the public have the right to ask to inspect the books and records, so they can ask for details of any items of expenditure. There are certain things which remain confidential, for example, payments to employees for the wages and salaries. But generally the public have a right to ask for information.
But you said challenge, not ask a right for information. So I'm just querying the word you used, challenge. That's a very different thing to inspect and review.
If a member of the public believes that there is any unlawful expenditure in the accounts, they have a right to raise an objection, and there is a formal process for going through that, and we have to respond to that and take and carry out further work and investigation into that.
So that only relates to where they believe there's been an unlawful expenditure.
Yes, and it would have to be a formal objection.
So there's virtually nothing that we would do that's not lawful unless there was fraud or corruption, you were telling me.
It has been known in the past in certain authorities, but
For example, a procurement. Somebody might think that a procurement process hasn't been undertaken properly. So you might have undertaken a procurement, but actually when it's reviewed under challenge, it could be determined that procurement hadn't been undertaken lawfully. That's an example.
Okay.
I mean, just to sort of put members' mind at ease, certainly myself as the CFO and Simon as the monitoring officer, we have specific duties with regards to lawful transactions and making sure, obviously, that processes are in place that, you know, those transactions can't take place. I say can't. There's always an element in there that you manage the risk and fraud and everything else, but yes, that's a specific role for.
This is my chair as well. It's also worth mentioning that despite the accounts being open for inspection as well, examination, under the Transparency Code anyway, we've been putting information out there as every local authority does for transactions, for purchase card transactions and the like.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more information out there for members of the public to challenge in any case, other than waiting for this period of the accounts being put together.
Thank you. Right, Adrian, you're on, that was 35.
There wasn't anything else.
Anything else in particular you want to
Take questions again.
push along? Fees at 36 and new power to use capital for revenue. Only in relation to service reform projects. Do we have any service reform projects? No, not qualified for that.
Not the qualified, but it's a bit like the old capitalisation direction that was there before, but he's given some new freedoms to specifically sell an asset that must be a new sale, if you like. We can't use proceeds from assets that we've sold before, and it's for assets that are specifically sold to do reform, but we must also then meet all sorts of other criteria, levels of reserves and things like that. So A, we wouldn't meet those criteria, and B, we've no need to apply for that particular.
Well, the answer from order is we're not going to use this new power anyway. It just doesn't apply to us. Because
This is a scenario then that we've gone through a strategy group and full council that we're going to build some houses and then sell them, but we wouldn't be using that power over the next 3 years.
No, that's quite different. That's using our own capital money to build houses and sell them. This is specifically about selling an asset, specifically to fund reform.
Well, funding reform in that when you're investing capital and then you're having capital return, you then, the way I read was that, and perhaps I'm wrong, that you could then use that capital as a revenue expense to do something else with it.
No,
I'm
that's
wrong.
not right.
Okay, no, that's all right. Thank you for clearing that up.
right. Anything else then on Adrian's progress report? No? Thank you very much indeed. Internal. Oh, good. Okay.
Sorry, on page 36, halfway down, it mentions that PSAA may well have retained, or the audit may well have retained earnings, and they would be redistributed pursuant to surpluses from audit fees and audit bodies for timetable to be established shortly. Could somebody elaborate on that side?
Yes, I mean, the letter, does the letter that we've just give a figure?
15%.
It's something like 15% that you might get back as a special bonus.
15% of
The fee.
our fee. Yeah. Okay.
As a one-off, isn't it?
Well, of the current year's fee.
Yes.
Well, it'll be the second one.
Yeah, the second one-off. We just don't know when to put through.
For instance, the last one-off payment that we received, as they sort of close everything up, was about £8,000, and then if this is about 15% of our fee, so something around the £6,000 mark.
Better than nothing.
Yeah.
That's all good. That's right.
Thank you.
We're mentioning that.
Indeed. Right. Scott, is this yours?
Yes. Apart from setting out the audit plan for approval, the Tupman report does serve purposes. Firstly, it sets out the high-level strategic approach of the Internal Audit Service, which is very much based on the Council's Internal Audit Charter and is a requirement also of the standards. And then the report sets out the main goals to us achieving or ensuring continuous improvement in service delivery, and some of the activities which if we look at paragraph 4.2 highlighted there, some of the activities and actions to achieving these objectives and goals will be reported in the annual report, which comes to this committee in June. Another key aspect of the report, which is critical to the success of the audit plan, is the assessment of audit resources. Our current position is good. We have a full complement of staff, and we now include that crucial support that we have now from the corporate fraud officer, who has been available to pick up audit work during the year, during the period of vacant post that we had. The last part of that particular jigsaw is the buying in of IT specialist audit support. Whilst we have been able to undertake some very productive work in the area of ICT, particularly around the Council's governance arrangements, it is still felt that there is benefit to be had in acquiring some specialist support, but unfortunately due to other service commitments we were not able to commit to getting this sorted during the past financial year, but we have now set time aside to deliver on this aspect. You may have noticed in the actual appendix, the audit plan, that there is a proposed number of days in there for the IT audit included in there. One of our key goals for the current year is to enhance the audit planning perspective and the process for that. The first element to this will involve demonstrating more effectively how our work considers and supports the Council's objectives and strategic risks. This is a key element of the standards in terms of, when I assess ourselves against the standards, this is one of those areas that we need to enhance and provide that further information to this committee, just to provide you assurances over what our coverage entails. The second element of that will be also to map out the internal and external assurances received by management and the council, and this particular exercise will certainly be more involving of management, and I've partly set out an approach to that at 4.10. Using what is known in practice as the 3 lines of defence, this should enable senior management of this committee to consider any gaps in the assurance once the results are produced. It's particularly important for senior management, internal audit and this committee to be aware of those services that are currently delivered by other organisations either contractually or through partnerships, and where that assurance comes from. So that's the piece of work that we'll be undertaking throughout the summer. We in internal audit will certainly be using the results of this exercise to better inform future audit plans, but management will also need time to consider how and when the results will be reported to members. It may be judged, for example, that the results, which very much complement the mitigating controls and activities identified in the strategic risk register, might be the best place for that, but they will need time to decide and determine how they want to report that to members. Then we come to the audit plan itself, which is in the appendix, page 49. The development of the plan is very much based on a detailed risk assessment, which I undertake and update each year. It's been consulted on with service management and key officers such as Audra as the Chief Financial Officer before it was formally endorsed by the senior management team at its meeting in March. You'll see from the structure of the plan that it's very much in a similar format to that of previous years, covering work, a mix of financial work such as the key financial systems of the authority, aspects of corporate governance, risk management, contracts and procurement, and more significantly now our work on our counter-fraud work, which is in support of the Council's counter-fraud strategy that went through Council during the last financial year. Other than that, I don't intend discussing any more further detail, but I'm happy to any questions that members may have.
Chair. Thank you. I've got two questions actually. The first one is directed to Scott in terms of the IIA guidance on the model on page 4658. Could you tell us please what is the definition of management controls and internal control measures? How do we look at those and who looks at those? That's question number one. And if you can store that on a moment. Can you also, what about item number 2, which is around reputational risk, etc. Now I'm thinking about the unfortunate incident last week with the vehicle of our contractor. How do we look at a bit more deeply at our suppliers and partners to ensure they're protecting our reputation because of their activity and so on? So in that case, obviously making sure they've got good health and safety procedures in place and being followed. Thank you.
I can certainly deal with the first one of those in terms of explaining a little bit more about this model and the approach. If you look at it as a layered aspect, almost as a triangle, you can almost pyramid aspect to it. The first line of defence is always management and their control of people, resources, and interaction with that in terms of the internal controls that are around that. Some of it may be the Council's constitution, which we'll come into later on. Some of it may be operational controls to prevent fraud and inefficiency in the process. So they're the controls that are always inherent within any system. And we focus in a lot of that on our work that we do. So the first line of defence is always those controls that management put in place. Be it they may determine some kind of supervision, management and that aspect to it as well. The second line of defence are those inherent within an organisation which, and a lot of this is down to us as a societal authority, what we may have. Using an example within here, we've got aspects of support services within the authority around corporate health and safety. We deal with risk management in a different way. We don't have a risk management officer and a risk management section like some authorities. We deal with that in a different way. So there's a second line of defence that's almost like that support service area, and then following that we've then got the third line of defence is then what we do when we examine the strategic objectives of the authority, the strategic risks, and do an assessment of what the risks are based overlapping over this model, how that then affects our work and what work we will cover over a strategic 3-year, 4-year period. On top of that, you've then got also then, which is the right-hand side to that, you've got then external audit and what they provide as assurance to management that controls, and they talked earlier about was it the income stream fraudulent override under the override of management controls and their assurance that they provide to the authority, and then any other external regulators as well. We get assessed by a number of regulators. We've got there's the Food Standards Agency who fall outside. There'll be we've got the Health and Safety Executive, which is a key one. We've got Surveillance Commissioner and and those coming periodically. So it's about us doing a bit more of a fuller assessment of where do we get our assurance from. We know where our committee is focused very much on what does internal audit bring to the table, and we know what external audit brings to the table, and we have some periodical reports that come to us on some of these external regulators, but we need to understand the bigger picture and understand where there's any gaps, and that's in doing so that then it enables us to look at our strategic risk register a little bit more, or where's our mitigation really coming from, so that we don't make this go into this complacency that can sometimes say, oh yes, we think that's covered, and it may be covered by management alone, but then that's up to the risk appetite of this authority. Does that sort of explain it a little bit more? Obviously, once I've done the work and the management have considered how they want to present that to this committee, then that will come up for further discussion in terms of what the result is of that. But it is an exercise we do need to, I believe we do need to undertake, so we have a fuller understanding of where our assurance comes from.
Thanks, Scott. That's question one.
Just to embellish then for question 2, if I take that one initially anyway, Chairman. Obviously when you've got a third party, as it were, contractor, that makes it a little bit more complicated, it can be said. But of course they are to work to certain standards within the industry as well. And what I will say straight away, I should have said right at the very start, I won't comment on the individual case, the tragic accident. Of course you would not expect to do that. No one in this room should do so either. But obviously the contractor will have controls in place as part of the first line of defence for itself, as it were. But we have a kind of interface role as well through the likes of contract management meetings, which we'll have. And to keep the illustration going for the purpose of this, health and safety is a standing item on that agenda, for example. In terms of, if you like, the corporate level, both again within AMI, but also in terms of when we, or any contractor, sorry, when we procure, we expect to see certain standards. So it could be health and safety, and it could also be, for example, environmental credentials and the like. So environmental outputs on the operation could be quite significant. So that's a kind of corporate level as well. And then thirdly, as was mentioned, keep the illustration going, health and safety executive, for example, and there'll be an external body which will no doubt have something to say on cases. So there's the same approach, it's just slightly complicated because of contracted, but particularly in the procurement, you are expecting to see methods of operation in particular demonstrated that satisfy you as an authority that you as the customer, or as the client, better way of putting it, are getting a service that doesn't damage your reputation, doesn't damage your property, etc. So it's a similar approach.
I think, Chairman, if I could just add one point to that, is again, reputation is considered within our strategic risk register, and loss of mitigation, as Simon's just gone through, is contained within the register.
Yeah. Any other questions to Scott on his report? No. Thank you very much. May we resolve that the plan 1617 as outlined in the appendix is approved. Thank you. Constitution.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Annual review of the Constitution. Not always the case you have to bring some changes through to committee and council, but as always, you always find something you think might be appropriate to change, and then practice changes. And so therefore you have some suggestions to consider, which is what I'm looking at from judgment of and the intention is to get your input and then to take that into council, and the council being within I've put a track change version of the changes in the members' room, and another variation of that, if need be, will be in the members' room ahead of council as well, so all members can have the joy of reading through that document. I do strongly recommend it. Taking the actual substantive points that I've summarised here, and one of the illustrations of how things might have to change, which unless they got it fully covered, arose because of the consideration of the council tax setting this year, where we had to have that special meeting on the 29th of February. So that was not something we expected to have to do. We had a meeting on the 25th, I think.
29th.
No, the previous one, we had the 25th. We thought we could handle it there. Couldn't, for the council's deliberations to be accommodated, so 29th. And what that led to was just look at the constitution. Oh, actually, there's some things here which need to alter as a result. So, for example, asking questions at a special meeting wasn't actually provided from the constitution. It dealt with their ordinary meetings. Because it hadn't envisaged, if you like, something of that ilk. It's a kind of tidying up. I don't think we would have prevented people from asking questions, don't get me wrong, but the constitution needs to be a bit more explicit in case that scenario happens again. So what I've done is clarify the terminology and use the phrase special meetings, and that will include extraordinary meetings, which we are more familiar with. It's also meetings for a specific purpose. For the record, an annual general meeting is also, the annual general meeting is also regarded as a special meeting. We tend to combine that with the ordinary meeting of the council in May. So that's particularly come up. Also in respect of meetings, again it came because of the 29th of Feb. Council tax setting, generally we expect lots of interest and people would come to that, members would come to that. But if it was another meeting we had to call, what if the question was not so appealing? Perhaps there might be a difficulty in membership, getting enough members to come. We'd like to think that doesn't happen. But what we currently have is if there's not a quorum, meeting is basically stopped, and that's the end of it, and all the business goes on to the next meeting. As opposed, I noticed in another authority, I think it's Newark, they have a period of 30 minutes, where what they do is they recognise the meeting's not quorum, they then say, right, we'll have 30 minutes to see if we can get membership attendance. And so, for example, you could ring up local members, very local members that is, and see if they can come along in time for the meeting to carry on. So that seems quite a sensible, practical approach. Why not do it? So that's a suggestion there.
Is it proposed to adjust the full council?
Yes, that's the important way of seeing it. But the question is, do we apply it to others? I mean, the provision. If I was to recommend to you, I've got to go through this a bit more. But if I was to recommend to you, I think you may as well apply it to meetings in general. To be honest. Council was the one where it really came to the fore. What if that scenario happened?
It's 1/3, is it? Normally?
It's a quarter. There's a difference for appeals and standards committee, but basically it's a quarter. So that all arose out of that 29th of February experience, which was interesting. Breaches of procedure. In the Constitution, any breach of the Constitution is to be reported. And certain council in this room in the past has questioned the definition of terms used. So you see in here, we've proposed a term that significant breaches be brought forward to the committee for consideration, not any breaches. Significant doesn't mean to say individually they have to be significant. There might be a series of individual, relatively insignificant, that amount to a trend of significance. Definition of significant, we've had to look to see, okay, what's the term that's appropriate to use? There is some reference to the same term in delivering good governance guidance, which Scott knows a lot more about. But we've had that conversation internally as to what's an appropriate word to use. If I give you an illustration, if I was to report on any breach, a member failing to stand at council to address the chairman would be a breach because it's in the rules that you will stand. It's silly, it's not appropriate. For example, that's the extreme. But the point being is, does it need everything coming through? There might be some need to just have conversations. If we brought this in, say, for example, involving the chairman, as to hang on a minute, I think that is something the committee would be interested in saying. So that could happen as well as officers making a judgment. But I leave that as a flexible approach on that. Next one, on the bottom of page 54, lobbying and engagement of members in planning. There's a role for the Appeals and Standards Committee here. I'm trying to explain in the report elsewhere. But it was one of the points that's come through as to whether we can give some greater guidance to members on dealing with this always sensitive topic. And what I've made use of there is the Probity and Planning Guidance, which is out, published by the Local Government Association and Planning Advisory Service, which has been recently updated, to try and give a greater clarity as to what would be appropriate. So that's been done there. I have, as I say, need to engage the Appeals and Standards Committee in some form. I'm waiting to have a conversation with the chairman of that committee. So it may be that this comes through to full council as a suggestion. It might be something still awaiting that Appeals and Standards Committee consideration, which is not till July 5th, I think it is, something like that. I think that's right. It's later than the next council, that's the important point. Okay. On to the top of page 55, strategy group functions. This is about being able to make timely submissions in respect of documents that are being produced by others. And the example, we have one at strategy group this week, where our strategy group has been asked to resolve to make the submission in respect of a neighbourhood plan, so that we can get our views considered by the examiner of that plan. It's something that's already been agreed by council. I just need to write it up in the constitution, so it shouldn't be a particular difficulty. Corporate Governance Committee functions. In particular here, the committee itself did a self-assessment a while ago, and one of the points that came up was in respect of giving itself assurance about value for money arrangements and the like. I've made some suggestions about considering inclusion of certain language. What I've done is try to capture that and use the terminology which seems appropriate to Scott and I, for example, about assurance framework. You looking at the assurance framework that the council and the committee in particular are obliged to have satisfaction over. And Scott will embellish that if need be later on. So that's the term that's been identified. In terms of service delivery, just a need to include responsibility for somebody to instruct the council and company to carry out a service should that be needed. As you know, we have a company on the shelf in case. The waste topic is one of those where that particularly could be needed to be deployed in emergency situations. And you never know what might happen with outsourced arrangements. Ombudsman, again, responsibility and ability to agree local settlements. For example, the Ombudsman might suggest as a local settlement you give the complainant £400, say, something like that. But it seems appropriate to respond to the Ombudsman's request and have someone exercise the suggestion and have the authority to so do. We can do it under urgent powers, to be perfectly honest, but it's nice to be a bit more explicit, is the intention. Again, in terms of explicit powers, cleaning up land. So those who get involved in planning, environmental health, this is section 215 and the Environmental Protection Act, those kind of notices, and they often refer to colloquially actually as section 215. It's given express provision there for the community manager who looks after those services. Telecommunication mast used to be very topical in planning committee, I can remember, 20 years ago. Not so topical now, and the planning committee itself noticed that actually why are we having to deal with applications of this type when it's not an issue. Plus also the planning regime in particular, the permitted development regime, doesn't let you look at the principle of it anyway, so you're limiting what you can consider as a planning committee. But that actually has come from planning committee itself essentially. Adverts are very similar. There's only certain things you can consider as an authority. So again, the principle's not at stake. A lot of adverts, in any event, are actually allowed for regulations not required consent. So there's a very limited role for authority in that sense. Procurement, this is where there's some updating needed to reflect new ways of doing things. So, for example, inter-public agreements included in the scope of regulations. Risk register, which is terminology I find a little bit difficult because it's not what I understood to be a risk register, but in procurement it's quantified risk, quantified in the sense of translated into pounds, as opposed to some narrative which we have, for example, on the strategic risk register. It's a particular procurement factor, so I'm advised by colleagues that's appropriate to accommodate, and also uplifting the thresholds to reflect, if you like, inflation, which is anything else, but also there's a link with contracts finding, which is the government's approach to procurement and the guidance that we get on making sure that we follow certain methods which link in with that contracts finding. Land and property, again some tidying up in respect of the application regulations or not to minor disposals, which are things like 7-year leases of relatively non-consequence. Also some tightening up in terms of recording of tenders, and that will probably feature in another report that will come to this committee next time in terms of breaches of procedure. some tightening up on recording the tender outcomes in particular. There's always some general presentational stuff, so you'll see that in the Constitution track change version, but those I've gone through are the substantive points, the code of conduct with respect to planning to go through appeals and standards committee, and sorry, it's not July, it's 9th of June, it's necessarily the sorry about that. 9th of June is the next standards committee. And I'll keep working on the changes with the intention of getting to the 18th of May. I'm not aware of anything else of particular significance. You've heard from the auditors, there's nothing particular from their perspective that we need to tighten up on, so that's good. I have had conversations with Dr. Scott and with Tony, and there have been conversations about some of these in working groups as well, so I kind of present them to you. I've been through to make sure there's cross-referencing, and I've challenged where appropriate as well to think that's not good for transparency or whatever reason it is. But hopefully you've got a sense of the sorts of things that this year are relevant, and as I say, the 29th of Feb was a good catalyst for 3 of those changes at least in the council tax meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you. Any comments on any of those? Yes, of course.
Two questions, please, Chair. Number one, on page 55, cleaning up of land. Can that also include cleaning up of land and buildings? Is that in scope? That's question number one. The second one is regards telecommunication masts. What if that becomes again more topical in the future, or is that not particularly likely at this point in time?
I don't think, on the last point first, I don't think masts are going to be particularly changed in the sense. It might have different capacity, but you're still going to have that vertical obstruction. And that's what really got people going initially. It's a bit like when wind farms came.
It's now wind turbine.
Exactly. Well, even that's now moved on. They're kind of old hat in many ways. Solar farms are perhaps more resonant, and they're starting to go out of fashion. So I think that's probably out of fashion. And also, I don't think the national regime will change. So your ability to consider things will be still limited. Whereas originally, you were even able to look at health considerations, rather strangely, under planning. And on the first point about the scope of clean up land, there is some guidance which colleagues in the council are actually looking at now. I've circulated it to community manager in particular to look at applying it to buildings, because some authorities have attempted to do that. So section 215 is on unsightly buildings. I won't name the buildings, but there are a couple in the town where we've had our eyes on, which we are looking to see if we can apply. So yes, it potentially is in scope.
I think particularly on my ward, and also my predecessor, Councillor Owen, would often talk to you or the team about particular issues around the town with buildings that don't do anything for the quality of appearance of the town. So we know a number of them, so that'd be very helpful to include a look at. Thank you.
So are you including those two words, and buildings?
There's acceptance of definition of land can include buildings. We have it in our own land property regs. But I'm hesitant to use the phrase explicitly because the information I gave was about a guidance document. It's a guidance document. So in that sense, it's not something that's so explicit in law. But authorities have pushed the boat, shall we say, on that particular provision in the law and trying to apply to buildings with some success.
It's a question of the notice rather than the willing notice.
Simon, with regards to the telecommunication masts and also the advertising, I think it would be proper for the community manager to ask the planning committee whether they would be happy to relinquish that power rather than ask corporate governance to do that.
The first one came, it's been recorded in the minutes as a suggestion that it's not appropriate to come to the committee, the telecoms mass. Well, that one has been suggested. I would suggest that full council would be appropriate when all members are present. Those who've been on planning committee or on planning committee, they can take a rounded view there. Otherwise, I find myself in the position of going to every committee potentially with suggestions. Really, the role of your good selves in respect of are we covering the right sort of basis and have we got a systematic approach to reviewing? That's part of your role as well, the Constitution. The specifics in respect of code of conduct are left to the standards committee because they do have that specific remit, as opposed to planning committee. Functions given to planning committee come from council.
My concern is that the community manager isn't a planning officer and not qualified to make those decisions without assistance. And if the planning committee is happy to delegate it to for example, the chief planning officer who is qualified to do this job, then that's a different matter. But I feel that these telecommunication masts, as you say, in the past have been contentious and can be called in by members, but invariably when it's a pre-application or a notification of prior approval, members don't get to know about that application at all, and it's not provided in the delegated lists that are sent to members.
I would expect the weekly list of applications to still cover the proposals. That's before they even get determined in any way. The second point, if it helps the committee, in that the suggestions have come via the professionals in the teams. So in this case, for example, the development control manager has particularly made suggestions in respect to both telecoms and adverts, as captured essentially here, which I've got a kind of ability to verify because I'm a planner by training, of course, so I can apply some greater knowledge to that area. So I do see the logic of it, but I also see the logic of it in terms of the committee needing to focus, if you like, on the more topical, substantive, significant businesses, which these days don't include those so much. In terms of the community manager being given the authority, it's appropriate to delegate the authorities to the manager of the team. There can be sub-delegations within that, but essentially you delegate it to the manager of the teams. The decisions are often taken in the name of that manager, and that sub-delegation is recorded in writing. It's the way of doing things, if you like. It's not to say the knowledge that's required to make the judgment is not going to be applied when it comes to making the decision. The team is there to give that advice.
Currently, when we have delegated consent subject to 106, that's delegated.
Yes. I think there's only one item in the Constitution that's delegated to the development control manager, for example, which I think is in respect of signing notices. But all the, if you like, the technical, professional planning, environmental health, housing, etc., responsibilities are actually in the name of the community manager. But the advice the community manager will get is from the professionals in the team.
Well, I mean, I've been uncomfortable in recent years of particularly large Section 106 agreements being signed off by the community manager, and I think that this is another step towards that. And Chairman, I don't agree with that at all, I'm afraid.
Well, you're raising 2 points, quite no reason why you shouldn't. First, on the specific proposal to delegate to the community manager, but equally importantly, if not possibly more importantly, you're querying the principle of the community manager being the delegatee of 106s, which you may have to raise in another place. Or indeed here, because it would mean an alteration of the Constitution. But in relation to your first point, the suggestion is that the community manager, consistent with current policy, receives the delegation here for telecommunication masts and advertisements. We are asked to review Simon's report, and we're not a decision-making body on the Constitution. That's a matter of the Council. You have opportunity to speak out for the Council about this particular point, or indeed make a proposition to this committee that the committee has reservations about that particular aspect of Simon's report. I think that's probably right.
Can I just also say, one of the reasons bringing it here is to have the opportunity for questions points to be raised, obviously. And what I'd like to do is obviously record to Council what Corporate Governance Committee has said, not just the minutes, and I can expand the narrative on the 2 points in here, telecoms and adverts, and also have some new narrative on 106s, because I think it's only fair to respond to the points, not a problem the point's been raised at all. So that's another option there to embellish what's otherwise a similar report going to Council. But you would look to see those changes, not look to obviously make those changes.
So Simon is inviting you to accept that he notes your comments and will respond to them in the way that he suggested, rather than any formal resolution of this committee. Is Is that, would you see that as an appropriate resolution?
Yes, but the thing being with it is that instead of the community manager, the development control manager would be.
Yes, I mean, and consistent with that approach, you would be wanting to advocate that 106 is after the development control manager.
That's right. Yeah.
Which raises those other points. Simon, you have to take that on as an issue to give some thought.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
We've got some time to look at it, so it's
Yeah,
fine.
Absolutely.
Right. Excellent. Any other points?
Could I just ask if Simon could email, because I haven't read it for a couple of years, so I'm missing it.
Oh no!
Sorry, did you say you were missing?
Well, I haven't read it for a couple of years, so it'd be good to take my hand
Yes,
back
no
in.
problem.
But for the benefit of the members who don't know this, Nick is the guru on our constitution. He made a big play a couple of years ago of reading every word and enjoying it very much.
I wouldn't say that.
That's what you said at the time.
When I lied.
This joint course.
Yes, right. Any further? No other points on this. Then we're asked to resolve that the changes be endorsed, subject to comments on those points that have been raised. Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's it. Thank you all.